guys want to say something?
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
How did you guys first meet? Meet.
Give us the details. She's asking.
Well, we met at Harper High School when we were sophomores, I think. And let's see, we had a ride home. We were taking Mother to her folks' house, and she was sitting on my lap, I think, and her skirt came up about to here.
It was a full back seat.
And
There was a lot of guys in there, a lot of kids.
I thought, man, is she nice. And so that got things started. And so I don't know, I asked her out for a date or something.
Well, I remember the first time, though, that I knew who you were, we were freshmen. In an algebra class, I sat up on the first or second row, and there was this guy clear in the back row, and he had a real high voice, and it was you.
Did I know the answers?
Yeah, you did. You talked a lot.
So
You did.
I didn't remember talking a lot.
Okay.
Well, so when you got in the car, how did you decide to sit on Dad's lap?
There wasn't any room.
Well, there's probably other people's laps you could have sat on.
Well, I don't
She was the last one to get in. She only had one place to go.
know. He was in a
Dixie.
carpool. I mean, not a carpool. There was how many guys rode to school together, and how did
The Lattas and the Botkins. Anyway,
What kind of car was it?
I can't remember. It was,
was it a two-door?
yeah, it had to have been two-door. Well, I don't know. John D. Jordan's car.
No, it was Edwin Lattis,
Edwin Latta, okay.
because you
Anyway.
rode to school with the Lattis
Yeah.
and the Botkins.
So,
What is your favorite color, Grandpa?
what?
What is your favorite color, Grandpa?
What's my favorite color is blue.
What's your favorite color, Grandma?
I really don't have a favorite color. Maybe I kind of like purple, I think.
Purple eyes?
No, but that purple color.
Kind of like the color Dad's wearing today?
Sort of.
How did you get engaged? Or when?
Well, we courted each other for all during high school. But whenever Christmas came, we weren't. I didn't go see her because I didn't have the money to buy her present.
He just didn't want to buy me a Christmas present.
So I never bought her Christmas present, did I?
No. Not for a couple, 3 years.
Did she buy you one?
Well, no.
I remember. The first thing I got you was a gold locket.
That opened up. You put a picture in it.
Did I put my picture in it?
No, I did that. It was empty when you gave it to me.
Okay.
When we graduated from high school, I went to Wichita and went to business college. And Grandpa went to Atchison and went to college at St. Benedict's. Right?
Yeah, I went there. For 6 months, I remember it. We had I went out for football. I was kind of football minded then, but I wasn't very big. But we had a scrimmage with the varsity one night, and I was playing end, and these other guys were from Chicago, right? Anyway, they had just got out of service, and they more or less drafted. I mean, they had scholarships to go to St. Benedict's. But that night, a scrimmage, I mean, I tore them up. I would play an end, and I'd go around the end, and I'd screw up their play every time. And then the next day, the Father Thomas said, "Who was playing left end?" And I said, "I was." "Oh, you weren't playing that." So anyway, then a little later, they was scrimmaging with the first team, and they had a little bit of trouble tackling me. So, but anyway, that kind of ended my football career. So,
Well, but tell them, she asked when you got engaged, so wasn't it Valentine's Day, like the first time you weren't broke up at a holiday? That you...
Well, that was a couple years, or 2 years later.
Right, but he always broke up with you around the holidays and your birthday.
Yeah.
How come?
He did, so he wouldn't have to buy a gift.
I didn't have a lot of money. I had it in cows.
I graduated from business college because we only went for 9 months or a year, and I was working in Wichita and living with 3 other girls in an apartment, and Dad came up and we went to a movie, and the name of the movie was Don't Trust Your Husband. I always remember that.
We'll have to see if they still have that movie.
I wonder. I don't remember what it was about.
So,
And it was after that that he asked me to marry him.
And you know, I just was sure she would say no because her folks didn't like me because I was Catholic and they were Baptist. But I asked her and she said yes, and I what am I going to do now? I didn't knew she'd have to say no.
because you didn't have a ring, did you?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, he did have a ring, okay.
And a big pale blue satin heart-shaped box of Russell Stover's chocolates. I got that too.
It's on Valentine's Day.
It was on Valentine's Day.
Grandma, when did you first learn to play the piano?
Good question.
I took lessons when I was in grade school, and Grandma didn't have the money to pay for my lessons, but she sold eggs, and anyway, my lessons were 50 cents for a half hour, and she would take eggs to town and sell them to pay for my piano lessons. So-
Where did you get the eggs?
Huh? She had chickens. And she would gather the eggs every day and she would sell them.
Like Blondie does.
Oh.
Okay?
How many did you have to sell for 50 cents?
I don't know. I'm sure she got more than 50 cents, but it was for groceries, which probably consisted of flour and sugar.
And cream.
Well, she
Well,
had
I
her
mean-
own. No, she had her own cream. Well, she
Oh.
sold cream, but anyway, that's where she got the 50 cents to pay for my piano lessons.
How many times a week would you take lessons?
Once a week for 30 minutes.
Did you have a recital?
Mm-hmm.
Mother always when they have school programs, we had them, I think, once a week. And Mother was the one that was always playing the piano.
In high school?
Hmm.
Well, I accompanied. I didn't play I didn't play solos. I accompanied people who sang. Or,
Well, you
or
was the
played
one at the piano.
You know, instruments. But I didn't play solos.
When did you first play in church?
Probably, I played the piano. That's probably 7th or 8th grade. And then they had, at the Baptist church, they had kind of a little orchestra, and Grandpa played the violin. And at that time, I played tenor sax, and I played that. And then there was a couple other kids, high school kids, that played musical instruments. And we played with the piano.
Her dad was real good
Now, Grandpa was
On
a
the-
good violinist.
violin. Who's got that violin now?
So in the closet,
Oh,
it needs to be fixed.
When you were growing up, did Grandma only have flour and sugar?
Well, when they went to the grocery store,
That's all they
basically
needed?
that, because they had milk and eggs and cream and butter, and
You grew all your own.
during World War II, you couldn't get sugar. We couldn't get sugar.
yeah, it was rationed.
The Mennonites they always had sugar, but nobody else could get it. Somehow or other they had it figured out.
They were kind of a sore spot with us because they would not enlist in the army because they didn't believe in fighting or killing. Now, some of them, I think, that were really, really dedicated people, they would enlist if they could go into the medical field. And like they would, if, you know, when they were in battle or whatever, they would go in and carry out the wounded, but they wouldn't carry a gun. But then there were others that somehow they got sugar. I had a friend in grade school that her dad always had sugar to can, and she always got, at that time when the war was going on, you couldn't buy candy bars or gum, the good kind, like Milky Way, Snickers, Wrigley's gum.
But they always had it.
They always had it.
The reason I didn't have to go to war was because Mike was born, and my two brothers went, Roger and Leonard went, but they left me home to do the farming because Grandpa needed help farming.
That was for the Korean War. And in World War II, he was too young to.
Okay.
So there wasn't a lottery at that point. It was all choice.
In draft?
In World War II? No, they drafted, because my dad was 35 and he had to go enlist. They took him up to 35 years old. But they never, farmers they usually didn't take.
So,
Yeah.
so
When
you
the
went to-
Korean War, we were married and had Mike, but Leonard and Roger were both single. That's why they took both of them. But Dad didn't have to go because he was married and had a family.
When I went to K-State, I guess into ROTC, I guess I was pretty good because they had me running the squadron. You know, I put them through the drills and stuff.
Now, you weren't that. That was the only closest thing to military you had, right?
Yeah.
So everybody had to go through ROTC at that point.
If they were in college.
Hmm. So I guess I did okay there.
And did Leonard and Roger volunteer, or were they?
No, they were
They
drafted.
They were
They didn't have
drafted,
no
okay.
choice.
And they both ended up in, was it in Korea? They didn't, did they know that were they in Korea or Japan? Korea, I think.
Yeah.
But they hadn't seen each other. And Roger was,
On duty.
he was on
Night
duty.
duty.
He was patrolling an area, and he weren't supposed to smoke. And he lit up a cigarette, and Leonard had gone. He knew where Roger was, and he'd gone there. And he came up behind Roger and said something, about what you're doing with that cigarette. Scared Roger to death.
About swallowed it.
And it was Leonard surprised him. So that was a big thing that they met up in Korea. And
Leonard, when they, in Leonard's battalion or whatever, they asked, is there anyone can type? Leonard said, I can. And so he didn't have to go out on the line.
and his group or his battalion,
Was wiped out.
most of them were killed. And he was in the office. So he lucked out.
My great grandfather came from Germany.
From Germany. And
And then they landed in, I think it's Ohio, yeah. And then my grandpa and I don't know, two of his brothers came to Kansas, and one of them homesteaded up where Andy McIntyre was later. He farmed that later, but he homesteaded that.
What were their names? The great-grandfather? Is that Xavier?
Yeah.
Xavier was his dad, was Grandpa Mike's dad, right?
Yeah, he's the one that was up by
did your
Dukla.
dad speak German?
No, my dad didn't speak German. But my grandpa and his brother, they'd get on the telephone, the kind you crank, and they would speak German.
Well, originally, weren't there three that came to New York? Three brothers came from Germany to get away from the draft over there, right? The war.
Mm-hmm.
And when they got to New York, one went to Canada, right?
Yeah,
And then the other two came to Ohio. Was that? I don't.
3.
Three?
Yeah.
Were there, that was Xavier and two brothers?
Was it Paul? No. I can't remember.
Paul was Grandpa's brother.
Huh?
Paul was Grandpa's brother.
Oh,
And
I can't remember their names.
What has been the best year of your life so far, and why?
well, it was the year that Mike was born. I helped deliver Mother because they didn't have nurses. So I gave Mother the ether.
Did you have to give yourself ether?
No,
You did a good job.
and I don't know what time it must have been, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I never felt so funny when I walked out of the Johnson Hospital and walked down the street there. I got responsibilities now. When Mike was, you take a real different look when you have your first one born, don't you, Sue?
When was the first time you guys figured out you had to wear glasses?
We what?
Had to wear glasses. First time I wore glasses, I was about 8 years old. And I wore them for about a year, but they didn't do any good.
Well, I was in Colorado, I think, when I first started to wear glasses, I must have been 40 years old. Probably. I was working at Martin Marietta.
And I probably started again when I was about 45, wearing glasses.
Where's the most beautiful spot you two have ever gone to on this earth?
Well, I will want to think it was in Hawaii.
Way back when. It was beautiful. I mean, it was really, really, well, of course, Colorado was neat. When we first went to Denver, that was a big adventure. Never ever been there before or saw the mountains.
Yeah.
I don't know. Between those
We was
two,
around Lyman when
we
we
saw
looked
the
west,
mountains.
saw the peaks of the mountain. Mother had never been there, but our folk, my dad and mom and two of her brothers, every summer we would go on a trip to Yellowstone Park. Seemed like, and we were there when Old Faithful blew the highest it ever went, and it had never went that high again. That was impressive. But anyway, later
You were lucky.
years we went. Why, I couldn't wait to get home to see her.
But when I was growing up, or when Dad and I got married, I had been, I think, west to Pratt, and north to Emporia, and south to Alva, Oklahoma. That was as far away from Harper that I had ever been. So I've seen a lot of things since then. Can you imagine? Grandpa Hall didn't like to go on trips.
What advice would you give people like us that has kept you guys married so long?
Well, I think family, the kids. I mean, our interests are locked in with the kids, with our 4 kids and grandkids.
Well, what do you have above your bedroom, above your bed? That same.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Always kiss goodnight. Don't go to bed mad.
and so
And stay mad.
we tried to do that.
Yeah.
Who was the first one to say I love you?
Oh, that's a
Now that I don't know. Surely it was you.
You think so?
I don't know. I don't.
These guys are romantic, isn't he?
Yeah. Quietly.
So one day I remember when we lived, I think it was on Sherman behind Piggly Wiggly, and I remember that day you guys got in a water fight with the neighbors, and I never forget it.
The Myers?
I don't know who it was, and I just remember it just seemed like you guys were like just having the best time, and I just wondered, do you have any memory of that day?
No, I don't remember that water fight. Had to be with Bud and Marge Myers.
You had the hoses out and you were running around the yard squirting each other? Was that it?
Had to
On
been
Sherman? It had to have been the Myers.
Bud Myers,
Bud Myers.
You don't remember that, Dad?
Marjorie.
No memory?
Yeah, I sort of remember that.
Was that the day I ran away to Piggly Wiggly?
No, I don't think it was that day, but I remember when you did that. It scared me to death. That back gate was open. Couldn't find you. What were you like, 18 months old? Or,
No, but I remember trying to hide from you in the aisles. It's kind of
I was
traumatic.
petrified.
Oh, the scariest time when we lived on the Hall place, Mike come up missing. We didn't know where he was at. We had a water tank down north of the barn. I thought he had probably been in the water tank. He wasn't there. We hollered, and
And Scott was a couple months old, and I remember running in the house to make sure that he was doing okay, and then we were out checking the creek, the tanks. Couldn't find Mike anywhere.
then I looked south, and I seen
Yeah.
on the railroad a half a mile south was this little kid and a dog walking down the railroad track. And
There's Mike.
it was Mike, and I really gave him a good spanking.
How old was he?
Well, he was just past 2. And there was 23 months between him and Scott. So can you imagine? He was
Was it
just.
a dog that he just found?
He saw the dog bouncing along the railroad track, and he.
It wasn't his dog?
Yeah, it was our dog.
What was the dog's name?
I have no idea. I don't know.
What was the time that Scott or Dad or any of them got in trouble that you were the most upset with them?
Never sue them.
That's a loaded question.
I think I'm gonna leave the room.
You stay right there. I think the most scared I ever was a time that Mike, was he about 4? And was I there by myself? Or were you there? Anyway, we had this long shed or garage, and the tractor was parked in there. And I looked out the kitchen window, and here came this tractor out of the garage, and Mike was on it. I mean, he had started it up and put it in gear.
Well, it was probably in gear. There wasn't no safety on it, so he probably pushed the starter, and it was running.
And there he came out on this tractor.
In reverse or forward?
Reverse.
Then what happened?
Then I jumped on
I guess maybe you were there.
I jumped on the tractor, got it stopped.
Wasn't
After he's
very
out.
fast, right?
No, but, you know,
And then,
That's good.
yeah, that same garage,
So
he's about the same year, I think. We had this horse that I really liked, and I looked out the door, and this horse was bucking and tearing up, and there Mike was sitting on top of it. The horse was tangled up in a gate,
wire
And,
gate.
and Mike was sitting on top. And I just, if he'd have fell off, it got him because of the wire gate, and the horse was petrified because he was tangled up in the wire. But Mike stayed on top.
Did he help the horse get untangled? Did the horse stay?
Yeah, I untangled. I got Mike off, and then I cut wire and stuff to get the horse out.
That'd been scary.
Yeah, it was scary.
And with Scott, I think, well, I can't. Scott never did.
Was he a good boy then?
No. Just trying to think.
do you like basketball?
I remember one time with Scott sitting out in the first time. Oh my gosh, you're just a little guy still in diapers, and it was hot in the summertime. You were sitting out in the yard in diapers, and you were sitting on a pile of red ants, and they got your diapers. Poor guy. Oh, that was awful. You remember that? No, I'm sure you don't.
glad I don't.
And then the time that, of course, you were older, when we moved, we had been living in Denver and came back to Argonia for 2 years, so we went back to Colorado. Were you in the 6th grade? And we were living in the motel for a month. And you went swimming, you could go swimming in the pool if you finished your homework. And you were swimming in the pool. I guess you were the only one, but there was a couple other kids down there. And one of the kids, the door, up to the door, and you were solid blood from the back of your head to your swim trunk. And I knew you'd been cut, but I didn't know where. Couldn't tell. It was just, oh. And Dad was working nights, and he was in bed asleep so he could go to work. And I remember taking you in to Dad and hollering, and Dad sat up in bed, and he saw you and all that blood, and he just called.
You passed out.
He was out. Anyway, Mrs. Kane, Pat Kane's mom, they were living in the hotel too, and she was a nurse, and she went with me to take you to Swedish. And you had this gash across the back of your head. You did a flip off of the board?
I learned to do a backflip that day, and I just kept doing them over and over after I did 100 of them. And finally, one of them hit my head.
One of them, you got you. That was scary. And you know, I hadn't been strict about having you guys have somebody with you when you went down in the pool. And
How old were you?
6th grade, so it'd been.
10, 11.
And I remember that same time, the Kane's youngest, was his name Mike?
Mike.
He was a little bit older than Jeannie, and Jeannie couldn't swim, I didn't think. And I was with them in the morning when everybody else was in school, and Mike said, "Come on, Jeannie," and he jumped in the deep end, and Jeannie followed him, and she made it across that pool. But I was scared to death because I couldn't swim with a tweet. Anyway,
So was having girls easier, Sue and Jeannie?
I don't know. I was trying to think with Sue. What happened
Sue
with
wasn't
you?
an angel, so give us a Sue story.
Okay.
Well, that when we was putting that apartment up in Littleton, 4-unit apartment, here come mother in the car honking, and I was in the apartment working, and I went to the car and thought, oh, it was scary.
Sue was giving herself shots for allergies.
Huh?
Sue was giving herself shots for allergies. She had allergies, you know, her eczema and all this, and she was giving herself shots. And this one evening, she had given herself a shot, and she came in, she said, "Mom, I'm having a reaction." And what did we have in the refrigerator?
Adrenaline.
Adrenaline to give in case she had a reaction. And I said, "Oh, Sue, you're not, you're okay." She said, "Mom, I'm having a reaction." And I looked at her, and her face was swelling. Well, I panicked. We had that stuff in the refrigerator, but I didn't know how much to give her.
And I didn't give myself enough.
And she put it in the needle, and did I call the hospital, Swedish?
I don't know, I thought we got in the car pretty quick.
I think I called the hospital to say I was bringing her in. And I remember going down there to the apartments, and I don't know how Dad knew, because we didn't have cell phones, but he jumped in the car, and oh man, she was in the front seat with me, and I looked to the side, and her lips were swelling. I mean, her face was huge when we got her down there. That was
I
a
don't know how
scare.
Dad made it out so quick, though. I
I-
remember you honking the horn thinking, he's gonna take forever to get out. And he was there in the car jumping in
That was scary.
You mean he was at the house and
No, he was at the
the
apartment
apartment.
when we were building them, and we were at the house.
And
So we drove by the apartment he was working on them and he just jumped in.
Oh, this was when you were in high school.
Yeah.
yeah,
You were building those 4 apartments.
There's a funny thing about the apartment, bring that up. I built the apartment, and hired maybe somebody do this or that, but Scott and his friend would come on the weekend and do the framing, and we had a saw there, and I cut everything the same length. And then when the carpet layers come to put the carpet in, they measured one unit, and I said, they're all alike, and they laughed, and so they went and measured, and they said they were all exactly the same. All the apartments were.
they wanted to know who built those apartments.
Anyway,
Who was it that built them?
He did. Because they said usually they're all different size. I mean, they were identical, but they said usually they're never the same. But these apartments weren't off a quarter of an inch.
And you built those while you're working full-time at Martin, and you built them in what, 9 months? Wasn't it?
mm-hmm.
He was working nights, I think, at Martin, wasn't he? And he'd work during the day at the apartments until he went to work. And he did that in his spare time.
9 months.
And I remember, well, you and Jeannie painted them inside. But I remember when it snowed one time, weren't you up on the roof sweeping the snow off? It was a flat roof. And I guess, Dad, were you concerned about the weight of the snow or what?
Well, the roof wasn't on yet.
Oh, the roof wasn't on. Anyway, you got in a fight. Dad thought somebody was going to get pushed off of the roof. I don't know who started the fight.
I don't remember what started, but I do remember struggling up there with pushing each other around.
Let's see what.
What else?
Well, when I was at Martin Marietta, I was on the design team. There was about 11 of us that did the umbilical tower and the erector, which was the big part of the support equipment to launch a missile. Anyway, there was about 7 engineers that did the major part of the design, and I was one of them. And one of the group engineers that was in charge of the project, he told Bill Lovegrove that I was one of the best engineers that Martin had.
Yeah.
That I would come up with ideas and they'd do them.
I remember going out there when you had a firing one time. I mean, the families were out there. Wasn't that right? We were in the blockhouse.
Yeah, and I was down,
The blockhouse had this concrete walls, or how thick?
3 feet.
About 3 feet thick, and it was a special deal. And I don't know whether you girls went.
And I was in a tunnel up next to the test firing, and when it blew up, and the little shaky was, probably here across the road from, I don't know, it was less than that, here to the kitchen, to where the missile was. It was a little shaky.
Yeah.
But that was at a different time than when we went out for that firing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of exciting.
I don't know if we got much else to say.
Do you guys have any traditions besides like the Thanksgiving dinner that you usually do? Do you have have any other traditions, like for your birthdays or other holidays, something that you always do?
Well, we always had the Wedmans here on Christmas Eve or Christmas night. Beginning when we moved in this house in '83. We did it every Christmas. We'd have my family one time and the Wedmans, Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. We'd change off every year. But last year was the first time that Marla offered to have the Wedmans, which was nice. And of course, my family, there isn't anyone left anymore but me and Wes. So we stopped doing that.
Martin used to have a picnic, I don't know, was it once a month or once a week? And,
Oh, in the summertime, it was once a month, I think.
and you know, they always had competition for the kids. And Mike and Scott would always win everything. So,
Have we
Yeah.
talked about long enough?
You also would play the organ on Christmas Eve, and Santa would always come.
Oh, yeah, we had Santa.
All the grandkids would always dance when you were playing the organ, when you play it.
why don't you play a little piece in the organ
There you
right now?
go.
Oh, now, come on,
Come
guys,
on,
you
yeah,
do
let's
that
do-
to
Come
me.
on, a little
Yeah,
boogie
just
woogie,
a-
Mama.
That's part of
I'll
you.
do a dance.
Maybe I'll sing with you.
That's worse yet.
Go, let's do it.
It seems like all four of the kids, all four of your kids have always gravitated towards sports. Did you do that intentionally, or did that just happen? Encourage sports.
I think if we started, we'd always come from the farm, and when we moved to the city, well, you and Mike were like, Mike was 5 years old when we moved to Colorado. You were 3. Sue was 9 months. Anyway, I just remember I didn't want you on the streets. And I think when you got to the age of, was it 8, I believe, that, you could sign up for South Suburban Sports in the summer, and St. Mary's had sports. The parochial schools did for 8-year-olds, and it was something to keep you busy. So you did it all.
I'd bought Mike was interested in pole vault. So I bought him a pole vault pole.
That was here.
Huh?
That was here, I think. You told him if he'd go 7 foot, you'd buy him a pole.
That was over at Argonia.
Remember that pole, that yellow one?
Yeah, you got hung up on it, didn't? No,
I think the pipe.
yeah, he was using a lead pipe. And that's when Dad said if he went 7 foot, he'd buy him a pole. But you got hung up on the
And
pipe.
I wasn't much for pole vaulter.
Okay, let's play a little music.
But that's when you start. I just had signed you up for baseball, football, basketball, and track, I guess. The girls kind of came up on the short end. They didn't have sports for girls then.
You signed me up for tennis at South Suburban.
That's right, you and Jeannie played tennis.
But when we first moved back here, Jeannie was in this basketball,
She played basketball.
and she was pretty good.
And she played tennis. She went to
They went
state.
to state in basketball, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
But they hadn't heard of girls in sports.
I think the year we
Here.
moved out was the first year they had basketball for girls here.
And Jeannie was good.
Seems like the girls were really talented in sports also.
But
Yeah.
Sue, when you were in high school, did they have volleyball that last year?
Yeah, I did volleyball. I mean, girls' sports wasn't much.
Uh-uh.
It was six-man basketball.
You kind of got,
And it,
So I did cheerleading. That was the most
you
athletic.
did, yeah, did cheerleading, and then when you were in college, you did the skip
Box.
rope, the boxing.
the chief taught her how to hit the punching bag.
You were
I
good.
mean, she could make that thing hum. There was nobody to keep up with her.
Weren't you one of the better racquetball players in
Yeah.
the state?
That was after, were you still in college and you played racquetball? Okay. So you got your taste of it too.
Yeah.
But I don't think we really pushed you, but you guys seemed to enjoy it. I thought.
Yeah, I don't think we pushed him.
Pushed you to do it right.
Well, I know for one, we never missed a practice, we never missed a game.
Yeah, that's right.
And the coach was always right.
That's right.
I always said,
But then Dad and I'd talk to ourselves and say, darn coach.
You would?
Sure.
Sure.
why did he do this or that? But we never talked bad about the coach. We always
Tried not to.
thought they were tops. Right? Unless you played the organ a little bit. Come on.
You'll have to play Christmas music, right? And I don't know Christmas music.
No, you don't. You play anything.
Anything you want.
Well, it's the same old that I play all the time.
I'll be down to get you in the taxi.
No, I
honey.
can't play that without
Be
music.
ready when you.
Well, this time it'll be recorded.
Huh?
This time it'll be recorded.
Well, that's what makes me nervous. That's when I make all the mistakes.
So that's a wrap on interview number 1. 2 and 3 to follow.
And 4.